Welcome to the Town of Bennington Select Board work session on water and sewer budgets. And this is Wednesday, June 23rd. My name is Jeannie Jenkins. I'm chair of this board, and this is our first time meeting in person, which is pretty exciting. Why don't the rest of the board please introduce yourself, starting with Bruce?
Hi, Bruce Lee Clark.
Hi, Sarah Perrin.
Good evening, I'm Jim Carroll.
Hi, I'm Jean Connor.
Hi, Tom Haley.
Gary Corey.
And we also have with us tonight our town manager, Stu Hurd, and our wonderful recorder, Nancy Lively, yay, and a number of town staff who are here to help us understand these budgets. We have RJ Jolly, who is the Director of Public Works. We have Larry Gates, who's the Assistant Director of Public Works. Melissa Courier, who is Finance Director. We also have Dan Monks, who is the Assistant Town Manager. And we have one more person.
John DeMore. John DeMore, Chief Operating Officer.
John DeMore, who is?
He's the Chief Operator at the Wastewater Treatment Facility.
Chief Operator at the Wastewater Treatment Center. Thank you. All right. So what I'm going to do is turn this over. So what we're doing tonight is we are going through the budgets for water and sewer. We are not making any decisions tonight. This is a work session, so this is really a chance for us and for the select board and the community to understand how the budget's put together, what it entails, and how that connects to the water and sewer rates. So it looks, RJ, you look like you're ready to roll. Is that the case? Stuart, do you want to say anything before we begin?
Okay. If I could.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What you have in the packet that we've provided you is an explanation of what the projected budgets will do to our rates. And this year, we're happy to say that the water fund will have no rate increase once again. The sewer fund, we are back in line for the 10.5% increase, which the select board agreed to some 3 years ago. We were doing a four-year process of 10.5% in order to get our depreciation up to where it should be, given the cost of the plant and the facilities that we also support throughout the community for sewer services. That's very good news, I think, that we are able to do that and be secure in not only depreciation but in developing reserve funds for the various pieces of equipment that we will ultimately need to replace. In the water fund, we're looking at straight up work finishing the south end water line or south side water line project. We won't finish it this year, but it's a continuation of that project, and that's to provide adequate water pressure to the higher elevations, Jefferson Heights and Crescent Boulevard. So that's the major project that's in the water fund. The wastewater budget doesn't have truly a major project. There are some equipment purchases that we'll talk about as we move through this. And we're using a small amount of the fund balance, which is currently about $5 million in the wastewater fund or the sewer fund. We're using about $23,100 of the fund balance to balance this budget so that we don't increase the rates more than what we promised folks we wouldn't do. So with that, I think we can move in to the budget highlights themselves. As I've indicated, wages are budgeted at what union contracts are agreed to. Benefits are what we provide both in the highway fund and general fund as well. And the insurances are pretty much stabilized. Slight increases in both this year, property and casualty and workers' comp, but generally not major changes in those two issues. So, are you folks ready to go? Okay. We usually start with the water fund. And the highlights that you have before you are the highlights that I've pulled out to help you understand what the budget is, how it's impacted by these various costs. And if you were to be able to sit down with last year's budget and look at it, you would see some of these changes being made, and this explains why they're happening. I don't know whether you want to just jump into questions or whether you'd like us to run through these highlights for you. What is your pleasure?
Do people have questions that want to jump into the questions, or is it more helpful? Is it helpful to have Stuart go through this? For two of you, you've never done this before. Sarah, you've only gotten the pleasure of doing this once. I don't know. I mean, so I'm just thinking, one of the questions that I had, Stuart, that you had already answered was on the third box under administration, why we have real estate taxes that are included under the water fund.
Right.
For Pownell, Woodford, and Stanford.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about that for a sec.
All of these properties, of course, Woodford, we have our water treatment facility in Woodford. We also have a water tank, and we have a collection pond where we take water from Bowles Brook, which is our surface source. All of those properties are owned by the town. All of those properties are taxable under state law, even though it's owned by a municipality, it's in another municipality, so we are taxed. Pownell and Stanford are the lands that surround Sucker Pond, which is a town-owned facility. It used to be one of our main water supplies back in the day, and those properties are also taxed under Vermont law. So because they are all owned by the water fund or were actively operated by the water fund, we have left them in the water budget where we think it's appropriate that those taxes be paid. Okay. The major cost, though, in that line item is the $31,000, which is our operating permit. We pay the state of Vermont that amount of money to regulate us.
Okay. All right. Did you have a question, Jim? Yeah, go ahead.
On the filtration plant, which is on page 3, the bottom box, you state, this year we must do testing. Is that something that's done every 5 years or every other year?
The testing that we've added this year, and Larry can tell you, he had to explain to me the SOCs. Yeah.
Once every 3 years.
Yeah, that's a requirement every 3 years. So that's a cost that you will see jump in this year. It'll disappear next year and the year after and so on. So, and what are SOCs, just for everybody's?
Synthetic organic compounds.
There you go.
Thank you.
Which are like your pesticides and herbicides.
What?
Pesticides and herbicides.
Yeah.
Are there things that are not in this budget that we should be thinking about that are coming down the pike?
And the water fund?
In the water fund.
Things that are not in the budget.
Aging infrastructure.
Yeah, there you go.
All over town. We run into water main breaks throughout town. So constantly, once South End is done, that upgrade to get the high pressure, we would be looking to move on to another section of town and upgrade infrastructure.
And where does the funding for that come from?
Either an SRF loan or a capital budget.
Okay.
Depends if we go out to bond. Depends on the size of the project.
Yeah,
We've been doing the South End projects out of our capital budget at small portions.
We've been budgeting about $300,000 to $400,000 a year to do those water line improvement projects. And so that will most likely be a constant unless we find ourselves in a major problem.
Okay.
Some of the water lines in the town are 100 years old or more.
Some of the 100-year-old ones aren't even the biggest problem. We actually, in the 50s and 60s, they used a pipe called universal pipe, and that's a 2-bolt pipe, and that is very troublesome. Some of the biggest water main breaks, like on Northside Drive, that was put in probably the 50s or 60s, and that's the one that had to be all changed out. Those are huge water main breaks when they break, and they catastrophic failure.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious, would it be beneficial for Melissa to explain the depreciation for the new board members?
Please.
Please? We need to hear it one more time. Just one more time.
Slowly.
Every time, apparently.
But there's new people who
No,
haven't
sorry,
heard it.
I apologize. It is definitely something that we always discuss. So depreciation is sometimes difficult because it's not a tangible expense that we actually pay to a vendor, but we book depreciation based on the useful life of our capital assets to set aside funding for the next time. So if you have some infrastructure that costs $1 million and you divide that over, depends on what it is, but 75 years, each year we book in the books, 1/75 of that. And the theory in that is at the end of that time when you need to replace it, you would have that money sitting there ready to pay for it. That theory is a great theory and one that we're working towards right now, but hasn't always happened in the past. So we are not in a position to do that, and that's why we have to have bonds to be able to pay for upgrades. But basically, it's to put money aside as things deteriorate to replace them in the future.
And how does that differ from reserves?
A reserve is specifically noted on the balance sheet. We'll have reserves for equipment or, that we're setting aside with a specific plan that could be designated by you specifically. But depreciation is included in the fund balance. So it's not in detail for each specific piece of machinery and equipment or infrastructure.
They both accomplish or are meant to accomplish similar
Yes.
similar
They're
things.
very similar.
But reserves are designated for specific uses, whereas depreciation is simply booked.
But there is definitely a need for both.
Gary.
So when you say it's booked, does that mean that money is put somewhere and collected?
Well, at this time, we are now, when I'm booking depreciation, that money is to be set aside, but because it wasn't done for many years, we're behind the 8 ball on that. So it's not to say that because we have about $5 million in the sewer fund that I have $5 million sitting there waiting to be spent. We are not fully funded in our reserve or our fund balance at this time. But that is the theory that we should be.
And this is because the enterprise funds, that's what water and sewer funds are. Unlike the general fund and the highway fund.
They're like a business.
Yeah, these we operate like a business. And for years, the sitting select board did not want to see the rates increase dramatically. So when we would put forth a proposal on depreciation, they would thank us but not fund it. And so that put us far, far in a hole. And thankfully, more recent select boards have seen the error of that, and we are now working pretty diligently towards building those funds.
Stu, how far back was that policy adopted? Long before any of us sitting here tonight?
I think, those of you sitting here tonight were probably in the first group of members that saw that we needed to do that. This goes back, it was back before my time as manager. So it's been a long, long time. And interestingly enough, when Henry W. Putnam turned the water system over to the town as a gift, he set the rates at 1/2 what the rates were in 1912. And we tried to fund a water department on those rates for years. until the select board finally realized that we were running terribly in the red. We had, I think at one point, we had 11 employees in the water department. We now have 5. Money was being spent that we didn't have. We were constantly borrowing from the general fund to fund these systems. And 2 things happened. The select board went to court to break the deeded gift, which we just recently did with the hospital so that the hospital could sell CLR. And we were able to then charge fair rates based on current budgets. That was the first big move to get the rates up there. Back in the day, there were discounts if you didn't have sewer. If you were out in the rural area, you had a discount on your tax rate because you had a septic system. We went to court to break that portion of the deeded gift as well, but we pulled all of those bond costs out of the general fund and put them into the appropriate fund here. So that right now, ratepayers pay for the full amount of the water and sewer systems. They even reimburse the general fund and now the highway fund for the services that those funds provide. So it's that we are finally in a place where we are acting like a business with these 2 funds. It took us a long time to get there.
And is that why we handle these budgets differently?
That is correct. And it's because you sit as the water and sewer boards. So you have the authority to approve these budgets without going to a vote.
Right. And is it fair to say that the bond for the water sewer treatment plant improvements are a result of not depreciating and not building up the reserve?
No. Well, I suppose if we had started back in whenever it was that Putnam, I think it was 1912, if we'd started then, we might have that sufficient money set aside. But we just spent a little over $9 million upgrading the wastewater treatment facility. That was, much of that was mandated by just failing facilities that had outlived their useful life. The RBCs, for instance, a number of the digesters needed some true retrofit. And we added a pre-treatment system to the wastewater treatment plant that wasn't there before. So some of it was entirely new, but much of it was to replace what had outlived its useful life. It's hard to project whether or not we would have had that kind of money set aside if we'd been doing it properly all these years.
Bruce, did you have a question?
I did. Thanks. You were talking, RJ, about, somebody was talking about particular pipes that tend to fail catastrophically. Is there a way to anticipate where the next big replacement job is going to be? I'm not asking you to predict it right now, but are you working on a kind of map so that, because I will only ask this because there have been, I happen to live on Washington Avenue and been sort of observing and talking to the folks there, and there have been some interesting surprises even when we thought they knew where things were. So I'm curious about this since it's all in the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting you did ask that question. We are working currently on a large diameter pipe coming from the old water source on Burdish Road, the back reservoir, we call it. There's 2 main pipes that come into town. One is a leaded joint cast iron that's very old. One was an addition that was put in the 50s or 60s, and that is the 2-bolt universal pipe. And we currently have a leak there. We've dug and excavated. It's 11 feet in the ground, and we've found 3 joints that are leaking. We're afraid to cut it apart because it's just going to keep going, more joints and more joints. So we're working on getting an estimate on what it's going to take to replace the 950 feet from the back reservoir down to East Street through the woods. that missed this budget because it just happened recently.
Thank
So
you.
this was-
I'm happy about that.
That's going to be a conversation with Stuart and probably
Mm-hmm.
out of the reserves, which is one good reason the reserves are there if it doesn't make this.
Right, I hear you.
But we are, you know, that pipe is difficult to work with. And if we cut it apart, then it may just be the next joint and the next joint. So we're.
So
There's not good records on anything in the ground throughout town, so it's, we don't really know what size most pipes are, and we definitely don't know what kind of material they are. For today, for example, on Jefferson Heights, they dug up a piece of that same pipe, and we didn't realize that. So I guess there's more of that stuff around town than they're hoping for. So yeah, it's tough. You know, it could last another 10 years. It could last 30 years, but there's definitely going to be issues.
Yep.
Because the bolts just rot off.
Right, that's
Special bolts, and then they don't hold together anymore, so.
right.
The
Yeah.
cast iron doesn't rust and corrode like the steel bolts do. So the steel bolts give way and the nuts fall off, and then it's just ground pressure. So if the ground shifts just a little, then there's nothing.
Yeah.
And we're looking, in that particular case, we're actually looking at slip lining that. Is that still
We've
still the
got prices
plan?
for slip lining and we've got prices for open trenching. And believe it or not, you would think that the open trenching would be more expensive, but it's not. The
What-
mobilization cost for the slip lining is extremely expensive. The companies are not in the Northeast, so they're coming from out west or Boston area, and it's a lot of equipment. So we're working on trying to figure out the best approach.
What is slip lining?
They'll pull a liner through the main, so they need a test pit on each side, or a hole on each side. We cut the main apart, and then they pull a liner through, and it's one continuous piece. And fortunately there's no taps off it for like a house or a house service. You can't have any taps where that happens. So it would work in that instance. You pull the liner through and then you hook it up. It's made with carbon fiber and a rubber material. But it's good for like 700 PSI. It's a very
Yeah.
strong.
I've seen it demonstrated.
We did it
And-
on the Brooklyn Bridge and we did it in a archway under Sunnyside Diner.
Yeah, I remember that.
So for this particular troublesome former pipe, that's where you would use it?
Yes,
Okay.
in certain places you could use it. We have the similar pipe on behind Molly Stark School. You know, there's a big main that goes there, and we've had some large breaks there that have flooded the school and closed the school for a week or two. That's that pipe. So they're big breaks when they do break.
Yeah.
That was a good question. All
Larry,
right,
thank
now,
you.
now we can all be,
Well, I just
wary.
think, you know, we need to know.
We do. Other questions? Yeah, Gary?
So, I don't mean to be dense on this, but the depreciation, we have 818,000. Is that money will then be put into an account for future projects? We haven't been doing it, but that's what this is for, showing up in here?
That's correct.
Okay.
So that includes our existing depreciation costs, plus what I'm forecasting for any future capital that Larry has included in his budget.
Okay.
And that number does include a lot of the PFOA water main upgrades. So that total sum incorporated with all the PFOA water line extensions, we're paying that depreciation out of starting the year after the first 4 contracts were done.
After it's in.
Because even though we're not purchasing it ourselves, it becomes our asset, so we will be responsible for replacing it.
Okay.
And if you look at page 1 of 3 in the actual budget and look for that line, so 415900.380 depreciation, you can see what it's looked like, right? This is what we budgeted last year and what we're budgeting this year. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Last year was 738, 710.
Yeah, so
Right.
you can see what's happening each year.
Where is it?
Which,
It's on page 1 of 3 in the
Right.
actual
The
budget.
actual budget.
Okay.
Create, 727.
Can I ask, I mean, I'm happy to see that we now have a safety budget. Was that just like we were pulling money from other places to do
Yeah,
safety trainings? Or
that line item is new this year, and it started with the highway budget in March. And that's kind of to keep track of what it takes to keep all the safety items together, whether it be vest or hard hats, road.
Oh, okay, so it's equipment, it's safety equipment?
It's equipment that we've been purchasing out of other line items.
I get it, okay.
You know, the hard hats might come out of the uniform budget or something like that.
Okay.
And it was determined by the employee safety team that it really ought to be shown so that you folks and the public understand what it costs to provide a safe working environment for our employees.
And so is there another, I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not here. Is there another line item for training for itself?
It would be education, and that's 410.
Okay,
5,900, 410.
okay,
So for our continuing education in the water department.
Got it.
We have to keep up so many hours every 3 years we have to renew our license.
okay,
And our licenses would come out of 720.
okay. Great, okay, great. Other questions on the
Another
water?
large project we are looking to do this year is the West End water tank, which is a steel water tank. We're painting the inside and the outside of that this year. So we have to take the tank out of service, and that includes setting up the West Road pump station on VFDs so that the pumps can run off from pressure. So right now they're currently either on or off. We're going to have it controlled through our SCADA system so it can we can isolate the tank and do that work, because that will be a few weeks worth of work. So.
And so the impact on people that are out on that end of town?
The biggest impact will be, at the time that we shut it off, will be fire protection. So for that week or two, we are going to have to bag all the hydrants and let all the fire departments know that they'll be having to do something else for a water source, just because the pumps that fill the tank normally won't be set up for fire flow. They only pump 150 gallons a minute. So that's a big project. You're looking at about $110,000 to do that work.
And that is a tank that was formerly owned by Fairdale Farms and provided water to the farm.
Right.
And we acquired it some years ago.
What do you do with the water to empty it?
Just dump it.
Wow.
We'll dump the tank when it comes time, because we'll let it go down if we know when we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So there'll be
Not
it's
much.
a
Just won't refill.
220,000 gallon tank. So we'll let it get down so low, and then the last right before they go in, we'll dump it.
Larry, you used an acronym there when you were talking about the pumps.
Variable frequency drive.
There you go. That's
and
the
that allows
one.
the motor to ramp up and down based on a set point that we
Thank you. That's helpful. It's just the letters I didn't get.
Yeah.
Anything else on water? Yes, Gary.
Just, I don't understand and maybe you can just tell me about the transfer to the general fund and to the highway fund?
Yes. Right now, the water department, their offices are now in the DPW garage, which is funded entirely out of the highway fund.
Okay.
They receive administrative help from the manager's office, the accounting office, the highway department. So we take a look at what those costs are, and we allocate a certain amount where they pay us back. So the water fund and the sewer fund both pay a payment to the general fund, and they also now, the water fund only pays a payment to the highway fund. Wastewater, does wastewater pay one too?
No.
Yes, because RJ and Larry.
It's a lesser value
yeah.
because they're not based out of
Yeah.
the DPW facility.
Right.
So that's what we don't change them very often. It was originally calculated in that range, and it's gone up a little bit over time, but it doesn't change dramatically.
Thank you.
Any more questions on water? We ready to move on to sewer?
Always.
All right. So Stuart, do you want to give us talk about sewer fund highlights?
Well, the sewer fund, you know, your biggest ticket item obviously is your depreciation. We do plan a number of capital purchases, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but in your packet, Melissa has provided you with that capital asset schedule, and it should be attached. It's the one with the multicolors.
Oh, that's, yeah.
And it shows you what we plan to purchase this particular year. It is a comparison between FY21 to 22 and then a projection for FY23. And you can see in the fiscal year we're working what those major projects are that are capital expenditures and what equipment we plan to purchase. There's not a lot of equipment in the sewer.
No, our biggest piece of equipment we're purchasing is a new skid steer to replace a 1992 Bobcat.
And explain what that's used for at the plant, Larry.
So in 2019, when we started our upgrade, we had to empty the digesters, and we had digesters full of sludge. We were dewatering it. We got turned away from where we used to bring it, Hoosick Water Quality District, because of the undigested sludge became very odorous and hard to compost, or hard to deal with. And so we tried to take it to a landfill. They wouldn't take it. We tried incinerators. We couldn't get in. So we started up our compost facility that was originally built in 1992. Took a little bit to get going, but thanks to John and Gail, who worked there, had a lot of knowledge about it, and they got it up and running. And knock on wood, it's been a godsend for us. So we compost 3 to 4 times a week. We dewater the sludge through our belt dewatering press, put it through we mix it with wood chips, and then it goes down the base, and it comes out as EQ biosolids, which is extreme quality biosolids. We end up taking that finished compost, and we end up amending the highways topsoil pile with it. So we'll add some of that into the topsoil pile. It's not what would you say, it's not even a 1-to-4 ratio. It's maybe a 1-to-6 ratio. A bucket of 6 buckets of topsoil.
So we use the skid steer to move the compost that has been created out of the pit.
Wood chips and the sludge.
Yep. And the 1992 one is we're limping it along. It's had some pretty good repairs this past year, and it just can't keep up with what we're doing with it anymore.
And just from a historical perspective, when we last upgraded, which was back in 1983 to 85, the plan was, at the time, was to take our sludges in liquid form and place them on farmland out in the West End. We had actually had an agreement with Fairdale Farms to do that. It was the state's preferred method of disposing of sludges. Unfortunately, we ran into a buzzsaw with neighbors. I can remember the meeting that was held at Bennell. I thought people were going to actually charge the table, but ultimately the select board said, well, we can't do that. What can we do? And so we went back to the drawing boards and actually received funding from the state to help us build a composting facility so we could compost the material. And we actually were selling the compost.
Right.
We were using
Sawdust.
wood chips that were from...
We used to use sawdust, which
Sawdust,
got to
but
be
it was
almost impossible to find and
Yeah.
very expensive.
Yeah, that's...
And it also, what it did is when we composted it, the material was so dry and became so dry that we actually began to have air control problems, dust. And we had a visit from VOSHA, and they suggested we either modify the system so we could add water to the air to keep the dust down, or shut it down. At that time, we shut it down because we had other markets, we had other methods of getting rid of the sludge, and so we shut it down. And along comes whatever it is now, 2022, 2021, 2019, and we have a need for it. And thank God it's there for us, so.
Are we still, are we making as much compost as we were when we first opened that facility? Are you composting as much sludge?
I believe, I would say we're probably making more than
Okay.
than we used to.
Okay. And we can use it all.
We used to run into an issue with storage. We used to sell it to AgriSource.
Right.
But we would get so backed up, you actually had to stop making it. You couldn't make it anymore. The way it's working right now, we're actually using the town brush pile. We get that chipped up. We're using those wood chips. So we're creating our own wood chips by grinding up our brush pile. So we have an unlimited supply of wood chips, and we also truck it ourselves to Holton Lane. So we're not waiting on anybody for our process. So we can keep going as much as we can compost.
Do we think we'll run out of highway lands to put it on, or?
No.
Okay.
We use a lot of topsoil.
Okay.
And it seems to be working well. Yeah.
And the wood chips are obviously a mix of softwoods and hardwoods. And it was the hardwood sawdust that was really creating the problems for us because it got so dry.
The fines.
You said enough moisture then that they're making more heat in the sawdust users, so it's working out very well.
Questions?
Yes, I have one. Could you talk a little bit about the removal of rags, wipes, et cetera? I remember from my tour a couple of years ago, that's an issue.
So during the upgrade, we put up a new building. We call it pre-screening. That has a mechanical screen conveyor in it, and anything that comes down the pipe has to go through that bar rack, a mechanical screen, and it pulls all the rags out of there, which is, since COVID, an amazing amount of Clorox wipes and hand wipes, which are a nightmare in the collection system because they catch on everything, they don't break down. So we get backups, and a lot of them we find it's because of those hand wipes. So that takes all the rags and you name it out of it. It puts it into they call it a washer, but it takes any organics out of there. It's supposed to take any of the organics out of there, and it dumps it through a press and into a hopper. And then from the hopper, we take that, put that into the waste stream, transfer station.
Right, so that's what we're paying
So we take
extra
We
for.
take about three yards approximately a week, three to 4 yards a week out of there.
3 to 4 cubic yards a week?
Of wet, heavy rags.
Yeah.
So it weighs quite a bit.
And before we installed this, all of those rags would get tied up in our pumps and our propellers and
Right.
throughout the entire system. So we were constantly
Digging
in a repair
amount of
mode.
pipe work or
Yep.
stuck in flutes and pumps so it's been, the rest of the system is great due to this, and it's working, It's doing its job. It's taking out everything and then some.
Yep, I get that. Just wondering if there's a way to communicate to our users through the bill, perhaps, that one of the ways to reduce the bill would be to stop flushing those things down the toilet. I'm just thinking, that's all.
Good idea.
Put it in the bill. Say, hey. And if there are other suggestions of that sort, but that one is the one that caught my eye.
They create havoc. They've cost some money for the backups, if they catch on anything.
That's right.
And they just don't break down. So then it just keeps backing up, and then it goes into a basement.
I did happen to see once what happens to those same things down in New Orleans because of the way in which that system works, and it's just crazy.
Yep.
So if you're listening, public, don't flush those things down the toilet, please.
It's not a bad, it's a great idea. I think we can do a bill stuffer somehow at some point.
We send them out quarterly. We ought to be able to send a message.
Pick our favorite. quarterly message.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about the repair costs that sort of went through the roof, and also just what that means for the future?
Yep. Which,
So the
In the
680,
treatment
the
plant?
5480, so it's on,
yep.
it's on the highlights sheet.
So one of those big expenditures is the bottom line, the $25,000, is a main raw sewage pump. So at wastewater, there's 4 main pumps that pump every drop of wastewater that comes through. Those 4 pumps pump, it's all gravity sewage at that point, and then it pumps it up and starts the gravity all over again. Those pumps have not been rebuilt since 1985. We did one last year. It was $22,000 because we did have the wear rings that went in it. We do not have another set of wear rings to put into the next pump, so we had to purchase those, and that's in that quote.
Okay.
So that is a large increase there.
And then is it good for another 50 years,
Well,
or?
we have 4 pumps. We've done one. We're going to do one coming up in this fiscal year. Then we got 2 more years to do. We're going to try to do 1 a year.
Okay.
And then they should be good for, I would hope, 20 years, 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the logical lifespan would be 15 to 20 years,
Yeah.
not as long as we've.
Yeah,
Not
we
from
probably went a little long.
1985?
Yeah.
And this is one of the, when we did the upgrade, and I don't know whether all of you were there when the engineers initially presented, the cost of the upgrade was estimated at $16 million. And we knew we couldn't afford to do that. So we had to pare back the project to the 9.85 that we actually bonded for. So these probably were one of the projects that would have been in the upgrade,
Got it.
but we had to pull it out. So, because we think we can do these over time at a relatively reasonable cost.
A
Okay.
big thing that we realized with our new SCADA system is there's an unlimited amount of charting that we can see, anything that happens. And we determined that with that charting, that main raw sewage pump number 2, it was not pumping anything for the most part. So every time, you can see that every time pump number 2 would come on, another pump would come on with it and only pump the same amount of volume. So we determined that pump 2 it's locked out right now. It's not even pumping. That's the next one that will be going out this fiscal year.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it was inefficient. We're actually just running a pump for no reason, basically, because the other one was actually doing the work. So, you know, it's those things that SCADA helps you find.
And what does the acronym SCADA mean? Because I don't know.
It's
And I don't blame you if you don't know either. But
data acquisition, something data acquisition. System control and data acquisition.
there you
Sorry,
go.
I had to think about it for a minute. But those PLCs run everything. There's controls over everything in the plant. We got digester temperatures, digester levels, the flow coming in, the flow going out, chlorine levels. It's all monitored on SCADA. If something is out of whack, we get an alarm. We're working on getting some parts of the plant weren't on SCADA originally as part of the upgrade. So you'll see some of these under the 560, I believe it is. We're adding in some of those other. You may not have it. It's in the number, but I have the breakdown. And we're working with the LCS company who did our SCADA system, and they will be working with us to get more things on SCADA, small pieces at a time.
And the goal is to reduce overtime costs for weekend duty. Because you'll be able to have all of that on a laptop. And you can sit at home and see what's happening. And in many cases, make an adjustment via the computer to prevent an employee from having to go to the plant. And because of the size of this plant, we always have 2 employees on at one time, just because of the danger involved in getting into some of these systems.
Excellent. So does this account for is there anything else we should be thinking about, or it looks like you've sort of given us a bit of a look into the future of what we might expect?
We're going to keep plugging away at it. We do have some money in this budget under the 5440 for some pump station improvements to get, we had some copper phone lines going to those pump stations, and lo and behold, the copper phone lines are no longer dependable, and they can't get us another pair to a few of our pump stations. So we'll be getting those pump stations on SCADA, and we'll be alarmed through SCADA, which is now going to be radio communication from the pump station to the plant, which is very dependable.
And is that 5440.560? Or is it?
560 is 680 is.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
repair,
and so-
that's a repair and maintenance cost. I did-
680.
That's
Yeah.
not included in your highlight package.
Yeah, no, okay. And is that going to be an ongoing, every year, we're going to need to, we'll have
We have
a fair amount in
five sewer
there?
pump stations, and there's a few that are still on phone lines, but we'd like to get them all on, because if we get a pump fail, we don't get an alarm until the level is high in the wet well.
Yeah.
So once we have SCADA, if we get a pump fail alarm, we'll have it immediately, that we know that pump is down.
That's
So
great.
somebody can either be on their way and to make sure the other one's working, or, get a septic truck coming to suck out the wet well.
And the goal would be to keep the repair and maintenance costs relatively stable. So we'll take on what we can take on within those dollars,
Yes.
allowing for some inflationary growth, but we're
Yeah.
trying to avoid the big repair costs.
Right. Well, this is really commendable. I mean, you're really looking forward. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I clearly don't know, I know about this much about what you do, but it seems like this is so heavy on equipment working, doing their job, and if everything is working efficiently, the cost should go down over time. I hadn't even thought about overtime.
Well, if we can, yeah, I mean, we believe we can save on overtime costs as we bring everything into the SCADA system. That will help. But as far as seeing the ultimate cost of operation of the facilities and the systems drop, I doubt that
No.
will happen.
I guess I
mean,
was thinking
there's
about
a-
the example where something wasn't working, so another piece of equipment was sort of doing double duty, then that's going to wear out faster because it's doing double, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is still a large plant. There's a lot of electric motors, a lot of greasing, a lot of changing oils. And when the RBCs were failing, a lot of our concentration was on the RBCs. So now with the RBCs working and everything kind of working, it gives us time to actually do what we should be doing and
Yeah, and it seems like
changing
then
the oil.
the RBCs may last longer.
Yeah.
No?
Well,
They got
yeah.
a 20-year expected lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
And we got 20, it was 85, almost 30 years out of them. And they got to the point where they were not
Yeah.
repairable anymore.
So,
And we actually
I wish
made,
I was right.
we made
I guess
some
I'm not.
mistakes with the RBCs. We're now operating all of the RBCs.
Every one of them.
There are 32, 4 rows of 8 RBCs. Some time ago, and John, you might know the history better than I do, but an energy efficiency individual recommended we take one line off, one row of 8 offline. And what that ended up doing is that sat fallow, essentially, not operating. And then when you had to bring it online because of other problems, it failed.
Miserably.
The RBCs are actually a rotating biological contact chamber. It rotates through the wastewater. Bacteria eats the solids, and if they get out of whack, if they get out of balance,
Unbalanced. If it gets
doesn't
unbalanced,
have-
it wipes the gear drive out. So they're 12'6" in diameter, and they're 28 feet long, and so they weigh 35,000 pounds approximately, give or take. And so there's a gear drive and a 10 horsepower motor that spins them, and when if it's out of balance, when that heavy weight gets to the top and then it starts to come down, there's the slack in the gearbox, and it just wipes the gearbox right off.
Ugh.
So it will either,
Gearboxes are like, they're not like,
they're $22,000 a piece, the gearboxes, and it will take the gearbox and just destroy it or rip it right out of the concrete and flip everything over. So it's very important not to let them sit stagnant for a while, which part of the upgrade, we added a 275 kW generator that's specifically for the RBCs. It also does control building, but on an extended power outage, those RBCs are going to run no matter what. So they'll shut down for the 5 or 10 minutes when the generator switches over, but then they will continue to run. So those, if we out 8-10 hours, then they'll be running.
So do you feel like, I don't know how many years you've been on the job, but do you feel like you're making progress or things are better than they used to be?
I would say yes. Yep. Very much so.
You upgraded a lot, but they probably did a quarter of what needed to be done because of the money. But we can do a lot of the work, slow but sure, in-house, which is great. But it definitely wasn't the, what did you say the first estimate?
16 to 17 million.
Yeah, we did it with 9, so there was a lot left on the table as far as upgrades. So it's an ongoing maintenance.
It's still a beautiful facility. It's there. It's just
And,
we can't
and,
just
you know, and
stop working on it. We still need to keep it moving. So.
and really, we should give a shout out to John and his crew. I mean, we have a crew of 7 out there, including a lab technician that does all of the lab work on a regular basis that we can do. We can't do all that we need to do, but we have a laboratory out there that helps keep us informed. But we've got a great crew now. They learned through the upgrade what really needs to be done to keep us in top-notch shape, and I think they're doing a great job.
Excellent. Yes, Gary?
Just got a couple of questions. Under the principal and interest, it says we have to add back in the admin fees and interest. That's the 179. That was from last year, is that right, that we didn't pay? So that's in the budget this year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the 10.5%, just so I'm clear, that's the last year is 22, right? That you expect?
We have, I think we have one more year to go. Melissa, is it one more year or 2 more years on the 10.5?
FY '23 and FY '24.
So we do have 2 more years to go. We'll have this kind of an increase in the budget. Really, the increase, if we were to find some major savings somewhere else, that increase might not be 10.5%, but we have to hit that target depreciation in order to get us where we need to be.
And the bond payment also comes out.
Yes, the bond payments have now come in and are impacting us.
And then I have just one other question. When I look at page 3 of 3, this is actually back to the water. It shows that the budget for 2020 was 3.2 million, and it shows that our actual was 2.3, and showed 1.147 left. And I just wanted to know for myself
Any funds not expended in a fiscal year go into the fund balance. They stay within the water fund and they build the fund balance. And then if we need to, because of our concerns about rate increases, we would then draw on that fund balance as we are doing in the sewer fund this year, only a little bit, but the goal is to allow that fund balance to build and ultimately provide sufficient monies, including depreciation reserves, so that we are, in fact, we have the money in the bank and we're not just have the money on paper.
And I'd just like to add to that, this budget report is not a true financial statement. And you'll see, so you're wondering why we had such a large 1.1 million at the end. So just above that, you'll see the water bond section, and you'll see that the principal payments are 0. That's not true. We made the principal payments, but and I'm not even sure that I can explain this. But due to the way that they have to be presented in the financial statements, they come out of here and are on our balance sheet. So that I'll need to do some homework to be able to give you a better answer, but this particular number is skewed by that $465,000 that really should be there, and there may be a couple other items as well. I'd have to do some homework to explain that more in detail, and I'm happy to do that.
So what you're saying is that under principal balance payments, where it says 0, we actually paid out
We
the
actually paid
465?
payments.
Yeah, okay.
But this
It's an accounting thing.
is an account.
Yes. This is why we have Melissa. She can.
It's a liability on our balance sheet, so it gets transferred to the balance sheet, and it doesn't show up in this particular account. This particular report that we use is most of the time great, but there are some strange things that we have to adjust for that make this not the best report.
And Stuart, I mean, I had asked you about the current fund balance, it's a sewer fund balance, right, of 5 million, and why we couldn't just, like, 5 million seems like a lot of money, and I think you said that we really should have something like 50 million in there to
Well, I don't know what
cover what we
what
need.
is the target for our total depreciation? I mean, you remember, we're trying to cover not only the wastewater treatment facility, every pump station,
The collection system.
every piece of equipment, and the entire sewer system. That's what the depreciation, so it could be,
Consider that the wastewater treatment upgrade costs $9 million.
Right.
And that's just the treatment system and none of the infrastructure. $5
And not
million
all.
is a drop in the bucket.
It's good for us to know, because it does seem like a lot of money that we could reduce.
But we don't have $5 million.
Yeah.
As I said,
Yeah.
because it wasn't,
Yeah.
it hadn't been funded for many years until recent years. We don't physically have that $5 million sitting there. And that's not unusual. A lot of municipalities are in the same position that we are in. It's not different, but all municipalities are working towards doing a better job in this area.
and our auditors pointed this out to us for years and years and years. And unfortunately, the select boards and, the staff were all of the opinion that we really didn't need to do that. Because we wanted to keep the rates artificially low.
We've done that in a lot of areas. Yes, Sarah?
So I just wondered, besides the line break that you mentioned that's not in here, do you feel this budget supports both departments? And also, this is for you, Stu, I guess. Do you know what year we started paying the accurate amount?
We started paying,
Depreciation.
No, I'm sorry, the water and sewer funds, that were on our bills. The community, what year we started paying? I'm
sorry, can you, I can't.
Yeah, I know, sorry. What year we started paying, the citizens started paying on our bills the accurate amount?
When we started booking depreciation, is that what you mean?
Well, I
Started
guess,
fully funding ourselves?
yes, yeah.
That would have been around 2011, we started ramping up towards it. I think that it was maybe 2014-ish. It was in that range, 2011, 2014.
the select board became the water board when I was the assistant manager, so that would put us back in 1986 to 92. And I've been manager since 92. We've eliminated the discount issue. We've begun to recognize more recently depreciation, but we also began to build reserves. So is there a magic date that we were right on? I couldn't tell you.
And do you feel this, besides the line break that needs to go in here you mentioned, do you feel this supports your departments
For the water,
and sewer?
water and sewer, it does. I mean, there's some things that we could add to it. I did cut out some things that were more of a want than a necessity to keep it at that 10.5%, working with Melissa. But they were, we can live without them or get them till next, put them in next year. Yeah, we'll be able to make it through with these two budgets.
Can I just ask what those are?
Yeah, do you have the question?
If you don't remember, that's okay. We can.
Yeah. We're gonna be doing some work on our sand filter at wastewater. Actually, you'll be seeing an application for an SRF loan for some preliminary engineering. That's not in the budget, so that's going to end up going out as a loan. That's our polishing filter for the last part before it goes to our contact chambers. That will help clean the water the little bit extra that it needs to meet our permit. So that number is not in the budget. It was going to be in the budget. We're going to go to a loan instead on that, and that is $15,900 for the preliminary engineering. That will tell us our options moving forward, what we can do to make that filter work better for us, whether it stays a sand filter, a micro, what's it called? Remember? It's a micro, it's got little holes in it that the water would go through, but then it backwashes. You would use a different method to backwash it. Right now we use basically a pool sand filter, but it's the size of a building, and we pull the water up through the sand backwards, and we end up getting a lot of sand throughout the system because of it. So that's one improvement that we didn't put in the budget. I cut it. We're gonna go. A few other things were some wants, like a snow pusher we were trying to get for the plant that goes on the loader. We can do it with a plow, but it was in the budget. It was $5,000, to help push snow around because it's a large facility. If you see the manholes around town, we got the big, there's some black rings around them, and that's a rubber material. We ended up cutting that out of the budget. It's about $8,000 to rent the machine for the week or 2 weeks that we rent it, and then the blocks are $2,500 a pallet. So we're looking at about $12,000 to rent that machine and do it. Took that out of the budget. We'll skip a year on renting it. We usually rent it every other year, but this year we'll skip 2 years and try to do it next year.
Thanks.
There was a few other cuts, but I can't think of them right off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think as Jean just noted a minute ago, on Monday, we'll start talking a little bit about ARPA funds, about infrastructure funding, so there may be some opportunities to get some of these things.
There certainly may be, and we will talk about that Monday. It is something that we are watching carefully. Eligibility criteria is going to be key. We know what monies are coming, or the range of monies that are coming to the community based on the town-to-town distribution by the state, and the state is now talking about how to disperse the monies that were provided for counties. And because Vermont does not have county government, they're looking at how they disperse those funds to the municipalities as well. So we'll have more.
So we'll talk about that.
Dan's our expert on that one so far. Dan and Melissa, that is.
And that's part of the sand filter work. We're trying to get some preliminary engineering so that it's kind of a shovel-ready project coming down the pipe. And,
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So should we talk about the rate calculations, about the water and sewer rate calculations, unless there are more questions on sewer? We should do that tonight so everyone can understand.
And what we'll be looking
Chart.
for Monday night, and you'll see it in your packet when it goes out tomorrow morning, is we'll be looking for you to adopt the budgets as proposed via motion, and then set the rates as proposed. So you have all the information now in front of you. If we're not going to make any changes in the budget, you're looking at our proposed rates that we'll be presenting Monday night. And Melissa, if you would do the honors of explaining this amazing calculation.
Right, if you can start with the yellow and just explain what each of those segments means, because I think for some people, so we're on this.
So under the water, the proposed quarterly water rates, the flat rate is for those users who do not have a water meter. They're strictly a single-family home. So they pay $145. Right now, they currently pay $145.95, and that's going to remain the same next year, a quarter. The bottom number is the 8773. That's if you're on a meter. That's your meter surcharge. So anybody who has a meter pays that 8773 per quarter. And then for every 1,000 gallons that goes through the meter, they pay $5.41 a gallon.
And can you explain who in general is metered?
All commercial buildings are metered. Most mobile home parks, we have one that is not compliant. The duplexes or rentals.
All multifamily properties are now metered.
Yep. I don't think we're missing too many.
Yeah. It's really, the flat rate is only single-family residences.
We do have some single-family homes that have chose to go on a meter, and they're on a meter, but there's not too many of them, a handful. Under the sewer, it's the same thing. The flat is if you don't have a water meter. It was $118.45. The proposed is a flat rate of $130.89 a quarter. If you are on a meter, so we assume that whatever goes in comes back out, which is why we use the water meter figures for that. It was $73.61. The proposed rate would be $81.34 for a metered service. And then for each 1,000 gallons, it was $4.11, and that would go up to $4.54 per 1,000 gallons that goes to the meter.
And as far as the calculation, typically the calculation is based on the last 12 months of usage. I pull those figures from our system, and then I go through and I pick out any that have had any major changes, and I provide this to Larry and his department to do some analysis so that we know if the changes were representative of what's going to be happening in the future, or maybe it was a leak that is not representative. That is normally how I do that, looking at historical data, and then I apply that to our budget to get a rate. But due to COVID and having a conversation about this with Larry, we agreed that we were going to go back 2 years pre-COVID, because there were just too many variables. Either more people were home, using their water, or the businesses were closed, or we have different types of businesses. And so in this particular case, this is based on pre-COVID 2 years ago.
That's great. Go ahead.
And Jeannie, you and I talked about this. Our water system does not include the residents of the village of North Bennington, because they have their own water system. They do provide us with their information just for comparative purposes, but all of the village of North Bennington is on municipal sewer, our sewer system. So we have additional customers that come to us from North Bennington for the sewer system.
The town of North Bennington, all their users are on a water meter, and the town of North Bennington Water Department provides us with those meter readings for the sewer system.
So we use them for the sewer calculation.
Yep. We use them for the sewer calculation.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. Jean?
I get asked this question a lot. The flat rate, that can be, it's the same whether you have a 5,000 square foot home with 12 people living in it versus a 1,000 square foot home with one person living in it?
Yes.
Okay.
In the ideal world, we would have everybody on water meters. But we've got 2,841 customers. The town at one time set aside monies to meter the entire community, didn't act on it as fast as perhaps we should have, and ultimately a petition went around to have a vote, an advisory vote on whether people wanted water meters. It failed. People did not want water meters, so the select board took those funds and dispersed them into water and sewer funds to help with other things.
So can you talk a little about why the decision to put mobile homes or multi-family homes on to meter those? And if we could meter it, would it decrease costs for everyone, increase costs for everyone,
Well-
fund our system? Like, what's the reasoning on the metering?
Well, the meter gives you an accurate reading of what you're actually using.
Yes.
For a business, obviously, that's a benefit. If they're using water efficient services and not all of their water is essentially wasted, so to speak, then they get an accurate reading of what their bill should be. For the multifamily, it was a determination by the board at the time that we needed to start moving in that direction. We needed to start moving the system onto a metered system. And so we did go out and actually, via ordinance, require all multifamily to be metered. Once the meter is installed, we own it. So you'll see in somewhere in the budget a contingency line item that allows us to replace these meters when they fail. Not that they fail frequently, but some of the older ones the hospital has.
Some of the larger meters,
Yeah.
they're only good for around 20 years, 20 to 25 years.
Everything's good for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's like-
Well, luckily, they've been installed at different times, so it's kind of a rolling.
So the people who would see a savings if everybody was metered would be the single-family homeowner with one or two people living in the home. Large families would probably see their bill go up because their use would be higher. Everybody would be charged the same, so many dollars per thousand. We don't, many municipalities actually charge large users less per thousand. I'm not really sure why they do that, because it ends up putting all of the
It's true for sewage as well, though, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, well, because of what
I mean,
goes in, goes out.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
which always was baffling, yeah.
we don't do that. We charge everybody the same amount. We don't care whether you're a large user or a small user. You pay the same per 1,000 gallons. That's the fairest way, I think, to do it.
And we do that for businesses as well?
Yes, all
All
businesses are
commercial
metered.
buildings are on a meter.
And manufacturing facilities?
Yes.
Yeah.
And as Larry mentioned, we are now requiring mobile home parks to actually put in a meter at the entrance to the park, so that the individual mobile homes aren't metered, because in many cases, the skirting would not protect the meter from damage in the wintertime.
Right.
But there's a meter pit for the mobile home park, and the park
I
pays.
see.
They may
There-
disperse that cost to their customers,
Got it.
but
They are very large users in the wintertime. Mobile home parks, they will turn their water on and let it run to prevent it from freezing under the mobile home.
Yep.
So their water bill in the wintertime will go up substantially.
Okay.
So if they're on a flat rate, then
Because
they
of
can
skirting.
get away with it.
and
Now, once they're on a meter, the park owner helps to
There are reasons to do
identify
energy
those
efficiency,
the
yeah,
problem homes
yeah,
and
okay.
get some heat tape on there or insulation.
yeah, great.
And the other thing that we do, because we're reading the meters quarterly, we send out notices to businesses or landlords where we see a spike in the amount of usage, to let them know that there's something in their system that's wrong, and that if they don't do anything about it, their bill's going to triple in a given quarter. I think that's really helped, especially with landlords. They're able to go in, a toilet that runs continuously.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think it will use a lot of water, because it's continuous, 24/7. And we've had a couple of instances where businesses also had problems and either didn't listen, didn't read the mail, and then they get the bill and it's 3 times higher than they thought it should be, and so they end up approaching the town and saying, "What can you do for me?" And in most cases, we tell them, you really need to take a hard look at your system, because you have a leak and you're not paying attention to it.
So it could be something that, as a board, we do want to relook at, or not, but, you know,
We could-
it does seem like it's worth, but particularly if there will be some money coming to make improvements, it's possible, but, okay.
Yeah, it'd be a major cost, but you really, because North Bennington's already metered, you're only looking at you're only looking at 2,800 homes. And of course, all of the new PFOA homes that just had water installed would be in that same boat. We'd be
Are
looking
they,
to meter.
they're not metered?
They're not metered. We
Okay.
didn't,
Okay.
because we don't.
A few of them are. If there was a duplex or a
Yeah.
farm or
Okay.
a commercial building.
Okay,
But a lot, the single-family homes are not.
No,
Okay.
single families.
okay.
Can I speak to that? Just over the years, in different scenarios, I don't, although I definitely want to be green and I want us all to use less water, I really think that it would not make as much of an impact. We have so many fixed costs, and when you're talking about using a particular home using less water and cutting back, you know, you're talking about, and this is where Larry has to jump in, you know, the reduction in chemicals, but the fixed, they still have to run the plant, and any time that we've looked at that, or I've looked at that, when we've had scenarios where we've seen a lot of meters come in, I'm not saying it means everybody ends up having to pay more.
A lot of people, like Stuart said, if it's a two-person family with a single child, or even just a two-person family that, you know, doesn't wash their car every week on their driveway or spray it on their driveway, their bill may dramatically decrease going on meter. And we've seen that a lot, and people have thanked us for talking them into going on meter.
Individually, but if everybody went on meters,
Yeah.
it wouldn't mean that everybody's price would go down. We still have the same.
We would need to increase rates to cover a cost.
Right.
And
Got
the
it.
expenses related that are not fixed isn't that big.
Okay, all right. Well, it might be worth doing that exercise just to see
And I
what
think
it
you would
looks like.
find that those who saved would be offset by those who don't.
save. Okay,
The
Okay.
amount of water being used would probably be about the same.
okay.
And
We use
Bennington right now is very, very fortunate. Most communities, as you all probably, especially out in the west right now, are all under water shortages. We're using 2.1
About 1.5 million gallons a day
of water.
of water,
And-
and we treat almost 4 million gallons a day
Yeah.
at wastewater.
So, and we have, Morgan Spring is 2.1 million gallons a day. Bullsbrook, we are capable of treating 4.0 million gallons a day. So we have access to 6 million gallons of water, and we're only using 1.5.
Got it. So questions about the water and sewer rate calculation? So we have the expert with us. Yes? Anything that we need to be asking before Monday?
I don't think, actually, this has been a great discussion. I think we've talked more about how the systems work and how complex they actually are, and what we're doing to actually make them more, from our perspective, more user-friendly. So I think this has been a good discussion. I think what you have is what it is.
Okay.
It's not magic.
Okay.
I'd like to think there was some magic involved, but unfortunately, there's not.
All right. Yeah, Sarah.
So I guess this is more about just the budget and the memo. This might be for you, Stu, about the relocation and timeline of Morgan Springs. It's not in the budget, but I just wanted to, since we're here for the session,
Sure.
just give it an update on that.
We received two bids when we went out to bid this year. And we had estimated originally, I think our original estimate was $478,000 to run the pipe from Morgan Spring to the lot on Main Street and install a pump system so that truckers could take the water there, come in from 279, fill up, no more backing. They could drive in, fill up, drive out, head out 279. The bids came in, low bid at $608,000, thanks in large part to COVID. And the cost of equipment and materials has gone through the roof. We are in discussions right now with 2 vendors, one very seriously, the other is hanging back a little bit, and trying to figure out whether or not they will participate in the capital costs and in exchange for a reduction in the amount per gallon that they pay for a period of time so they can recover their cost. Essentially, they'll be loaning us the money and recovering their costs through a reduction in what we charge them. And the one caveat that we have told them is we currently are making around $100,000, $110,000 a year in sales. We will not go below that. So when we get this facility in place, we're probably going to be seeing a cost per gallon twice what we are currently charging. And those folks might get the break to bring them back what they're currently paying. But they'll be able to write off that debt over time. And we're looking probably 3 to 7 years, depending on how much they agree to participate. We may end up having to use some of our reserves to offset the cost. I think if the price had come in at 500 grand, I think we wouldn't be talking about using any of our reserves. But that's a shocking number, and it was shocking to the vendors we're dealing with. But we hope to be able to do this without impacting the rates at all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, that's a great question. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I want to just make a brief announcement for the,
Just into the meeting.
well,
Now that we're done.
Go ahead.
I can still run my mouth and do it outside of the meeting. I'm good at it. I just wanted to make people aware that Bennington's first dog park will have a ribbon cutting ceremony Saturday at 2 o'clock. You're asked not to bring your dogs that first day, but on the following day, dogs will be welcome to the dog park. Should be fun. And there are quite a few people who should be thanked for doing this, especially in the time of COVID. And I think the dogs are going to love it.
I do too. Thank you.
Yep. Now we can go.
All right. Good night, everybody.